वालेकुम सलाम, तशरीफ रखें. All right, Mr. Muhammad Raza, let's start. My first question to you would be, will you like to tell the panel where is the economy of Pakistan heading in the wake of COVID-19?
Sir, basically, as we have seen that our economy has performed at a negative 0.4% rate in 2020. But if you see that 2020 was largely, I believe, dominated by 4 themes, which were not only kind of blessing in disguise for our economy, but it would also help us into the future. The first one being that during COVID-19, Pakistan has been involved in a drive towards innovation. Especially if we look towards that in the medical field, where we have been able to invest into building our indigenous ventilators and are also working towards making COVID vaccines as well. Other than that, a second important theme that has dominated our economy was basically the centralized role of the state bank that it has played into not only by making developing finance as more of a primary function of itself. We have seen through TERF, which was the Temporary Economic Refinance Program, through which we have financed at subsidized rates new investments into the economy. However, if you look at the last 70 years, this was not a role of the state bank that it has played. So in that way, state bank has played an important role in uplifting the economy during this time. Other than that, sir, I believe that COVID has definitely also shifted our government's focus from being a services-based economy towards a manufacturing base as well. Because during all this time, we have seen that our government has been much more focused towards improving the lives of the common laborers that were working in those manufacturing units. They were also subsidizing the loans and also rolling over the loans for such installations as well. And the results are in front of us: automobile sector, construction sector, and even textile sector. They have recently grown much larger than what services industry has contributed.
Okay, thank you. My second question would be, what is Magna Carta and what effect, if any, has it had on democracy in the UK?
So Magna Carta, I believe it was signed in 1215. It was against basically certain barons who were rebelling against King John of England, if I'm not wrong. And it had various sections in it which related to, firstly, this was the first time that the divine rights of the king was challenged. Previously, it was believed that he was not answerable to anyone, but after Magna Carta, people established a certain relationship with him to keep him accountable in a manner. Other than that, Magna Carta, especially after the glorious revolution of 1688 and the subsequent passage of the Bill of Rights, has also established the supremacy of parliamentary democracy in the UK.
Okay. Can you talk to the panel for a minute on the Battle of Plassey of 1757 and the role played in it of people like Mir Jafar?
So Battle of Plassey, as you've already mentioned, it took place in 1757 in Bengal. Basically, there were 2 key parties to it. The first was the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla, who was also being allied with certain French allies as well. And it was fought against the army of East India Company of Robert Clive. So the French army, it was basically a part of Nawab Siraj-ud-Dawla because of the 7-year war that was also taking place in the Europe during the same time. Other than that, we have seen that more than 50,000 army of Nawab Siraj-ud-Dawla was defeated by only 3,000 men of Robert Clive's army, mainly because of the assistance that was lended to Robert Clive through the infamous Mir Jafar, who betrayed the Nawab of Bengal, and it had severe consequences on.
How did he betray the Nawab?
Sir, there are several stories that I have heard regarding that, especially where it's told that he did not properly store the explosive and cartridges of the army of Nawab Sirajud-Dowla, and there was probably a rainstorm or something like that, and he was not able to utilize his strengths. That's what I believe.
Okay, never mind. Now you have studied gender studies and US history.
Yes.
Tell me, who is Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy?
So Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy she is basically a filmmaker by profession. She belongs from Pakistan, and she has won several accolades for the country, especially 2 Oscars for her documentaries. One of them was called Saving Faces, which was about acid burn victims, and the second one, I think it was called A Girl in the River.
Girl in the
which was
River.
related to honor killing. She is a very pro women rights kind of a person for the country, and I believe her work also relates to that.
Good. Now my last question on US history. What was the Boston Massacre, and how will you relate it or compare it to the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy?
So Boston Massacre, it took place basically in 1770 in the port city of Boston, where certain protesters were protesting against some new taxes, especially the Stamp Duty Act, if I'm not wrong. And on that, there was there was certain custom police or some guards of the UK Army, British Army, who were present there, and they retaliated and they fired upon them. It did not cause much deaths, but it certainly enshrined in itself a revolution.
How many people lost their lives?
Sir, if I'm allowed to take a guess, I think it was 5 people.
Okay, 4. All right, 4 or 5. And still they call it a massacre. Come to the second part of my question, please.
Coming towards the second part of the question, which was about the Jallianwala Bagh incident. So basically, there were certain people who were celebrating Baisakhi in the Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar, and there were certain acts, especially called the Roulette Acts, that had been passed, where such a large gathering was not allowed. And during that particular festival, General Dyer, he basically closed all the exit points of that bar, and he opened fire at them, and several, I think more than 200 or 300 people they died in that incident.
All right, I leave you at that. Thank you, Shahid Sahab.
Okay. Muhammad Raza,
Yes, sir.
you are a banker by profession, working as assistant director and SBP. So tell us something about monetary policy.
So basically, monetary policy is basically, it relates to these to controlling the supply of money into the economy. There are various tools through which the state bank or any other central bank implements its monetary policy. The first and the foremost being that of controlling the interest rates in the economy. Other than that, they could also control the reserve ratio with the banks as well. Through these, and even through open market operations, they can control the supply of money in order to implement their agenda, which could be an expansionary policy, or it could be a contractionary policy as well.
Okay. How banks can play an active role in development of a country?
So I believe banks they play the most active role in the development of the economy, because they supply the bloodline that is needed for any industrial growth. They give out debts for various activities, especially business activities that generate not only additional taxes for us, but also generates economic activity, generates employment, and all kind of such measures as well. Other than that, the second role that a bank also plays that is really important, especially in terms of trade, because banks are the settlement point of those trades where you can trade.
Okay. You have also studied American history.
Yes, sir.
Tell us something about Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan.
So I'll start with the Marshall Plan first. So Marshall Plan was basically a plan in the late 1940s, which was introduced by George Marshall, who was the Secretary of State of US during those era. And it was aimed at, it had a 4-point agenda, basically. The first one being that it was to reconstruct the war-torn Europe, especially Western Europe, which included countries like UK, France, and West Germany. Other than that, it also aimed towards stabilizing their currency, which had lost its worth during the World War. And the third agenda was to limit the Soviet influence in that era, because Soviet Union was actively engaging with its allies to build them economically. So probably since the US was trying to control the spread of communism into its allies, so it introduced this plan. I think it was, if I believe that it was worth around $15 billion during that time. Coming towards the second part.
And why it was named as Marshall?
So it was named after that Secretary of State who introduced that policy.
Okay.
Coming towards the second part of the question about the Truman Doctrine. So basically, Harry Truman, he was the president after Franklin D. Roosevelt, and his policy was that in order to limit the spread of communism and to avoid that domino effect of countries falling into the Soviet camp, he should introduce various reforms, especially aid-related programs and such assistance, even military assistance, economic assistance, so that he could build a very strong reputation with its
Most
allies.
important part was providing military assistance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell us something about purchase of Alaska and Florida.
So the purchase of Florida, it was established under the Adam-Onis Treaty in 1819.